Hi, this is Margaret Marsh with Civic Nebraska from the Voting Rights Team, and today we're going to talk a little bit about Native American voting rights. And we're going to talk specifically about the Native Citizenship Act, but in order to understand that, we're going to need to go back a little bit farther. So we're going to start on July 28th, 1868, when the 14th Amendment was ratified. And it states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States, and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So then we'll move on to April 5th, 1880, and John Elk, who was born on the Winnebago Nation right here in Nebraska, attempts to register to vote in Omaha, Nebraska. His request is denied by Charles Wilkins, who is the Register of Voters for the 5th Ward. Elk sues, and his case will go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. On April 28th, they will hear his case in 1884, Elk versus Wilkins. And Elk argues that as he has renounced his tribal allegiance under the Citizenship Clause, he is a U.S. citizen entitled to all the rights and privileges as stated in the 14th Amendment. And of course, that would include his voting rights. The U.S. Supreme Court will discuss his case, and they announced their verdict on November 3rd, 1884. They conclude that Elk's allegiance is determined by his birth. He is not a U.S. citizen. Two of the judges in that case dissented, but regardless, he is not given his voting rights, and nor are any other Native Americans. Never mind that 8 of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence were born overseas. Despite the best efforts of John Elk, Native Americans wouldn't broadly receive U.S. citizenship until June 2nd, 1924, with the passage of the Native Citizenship, also called the Snyder Act. It states, be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that all non-citizen Indians born within the territorial limits of the United States be, and they are hereby declared to be citizens of the United States. But that still isn't the end of the story. It would take another 40 years for full compliance from all 50 states. In 1948, the Arizona Supreme Court strikes down a constitutional provision that barred Native Americans from voting. In 1954, the Maine suffrage for Native Americans referendum was passed. In 1962, Utah finally extends the right to vote to Native Americans. And even as late as 1970, the Supreme Court had to bar Arizona from requiring literacy tests for voters, which often disenfranchised tribal members that did not have English as their first language. But it is an ancient history. Even today, there are still attempts made to deprive Native Americans of their voting rights. In 2008, the Alaskan government eliminated polling locations for Alaskan Native villages in a district realignment that resulted in voters having to travel by plane to reach their polling location. And in 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected an appeal on behalf of Native American and rural voters in South Dakota against a restrictive voter ID law that excluded post office boxes as legitimate addresses. That law is still on the books, and it will be a challenge for voters in South Dakota this next election coming up in November. On the screen, you also will see a picture of my grandmother and my great uncle, who were both born on the Cherokee Nation. And as such, I have my mother here with us today, too, to talk a little bit about Native American voting rights and how important that was to my grandmother. Mom, what would you like people to know about what your mom felt about voting?
Well, back up a little bit. My mom married in 1916. She was Cherokee, and my father was an Irish immigrant, and he was not yet a citizen. What they didn't know was that, according to the law, an American woman who married a man who was not a citizen automatically renounced her own citizenship. Well, they didn't know that. First, in 1916, it didn't matter because women couldn't vote. But years later, when after the suffrage and women were enfranchised, my uncle, my mother's brother, who was a lawyer, he told my mom that she was not allowed to vote. Well, she was pretty miffed by that, but she went down to the courthouse and had to go through the citizenship process. The judge who presided over it at the end made a speech to all of these new citizens, and he said, "Many of you have been in this country only a short time, but one woman here, her ancestors were here to greet the Mayflower." So when my mom got home, she and told my dad she was a citizen. He said he was very relieved because he was sick and tired of being married to a foreigner.
Like Grandpa, he was a bit of a wit now, wasn't he?
He was.
Oh, well, thanks, Mom. And everyone out there, if you are interested in protecting Native American voting rights, please think about joining our outreach circle and becoming a voting rights advocate. Also, if you're interested in advocating for anyone's voting rights, it's a great way to get involved. We have all different types of activities and ways for you to participate at your own comfort level. So you see on your screen, there's the link to our outreach circle, and there's a QR code. Signing up is very quick and very easy. So thank you for joining us today, and let's protect that right. Thanks, Mom.
You're welcome.